So just a warning that this video is probably going to trigger some of you. If you don't know who I am, my name is Tim Grimes. I'm a writer, coach, and counselor who specializes in stress management and relates a lot of those ideas to popular law of attraction, law of assumption, manifesting concepts. One of my books is actually free today on Kindle. If you're watching this when this comes out, I'll put the link in the description. The Law of Attraction Simplified. Good book. But as I said, I am a coach and counselor, and I work with people one-on-one over Zoom, sometimes in person, sometimes just over the phone. But regardless, I interact with a lot of people regarding this manifesting stuff, not just in a digital, online, social media way, but in a real way where I get to know my client. And so, first of all, if you ever want to talk to me, I offer, short free consultations. You get to talk to a real person about this stuff. You can contact me if you're interested in that. But because I coach people in this way, in this more direct, you could say traditional way, right, where you actually are counseling someone, actually talking to a real person, not just sending emails or text messages or messages on Reddit or Instagram back and forth, the experiences I have to relay compared to a lot of people who call themselves coaches in this community is probably vastly different. Because just to be frank, I get a hell of a lot deeper with my clients than most of these purported, manifestation coaches do. And also, just to be frank, I know a hell of a lot more about the topic from like an educational level. And I don't say that because I'm some great academic. It's just if you've watched any of my videos, you've heard me probably say this before. Most people, getting inspired or finding out about LOA stuff on YouTube have like the equivalent of like an elementary school or middle school grade education level when it comes to this stuff. And I've been doing this for a long time. I've had a lot of success, I've had a lot of failures, and I have probably more like a college level or graduate level degree understanding and application of these concepts. And generally speaking, the people I work with do too. They've been into this stuff for a while, the people who follow my channel. And I say all this because what I want to get across in this video is that the way these concepts are explained, specifically something like robotic affirmations, which is very popular right now, the way they are explained online is not going to work for most of you. It's not. And the thing is, I'm a big fan of Sammy Ingram in many ways. I've made many, many videos about Sammy and her approach to affirming. I think it's very interesting, right? I'll put a link above to one of the videos or a podcast episode I did a couple of years ago about it. I've been talking about her approach for years. And I want you to understand that I like a lot of what she says when it comes to robotic affirming. I think it's a wonderful tool. And I've made more videos on it and, recorded more advice about, the psychology of robotically affirming and affirmations in general, and how people like Neville and Joseph Murphy, Catherine Ponder, H. Emily Cady, how they utilized affirmations. I've spoken a lot more about that than Sammy Ingram ever has. And I've also made, numerous videos about my favorite law of attraction type of teacher, Emile Coué, who, in my opinion, it was the master at explaining why affirmations work or do not work, right? He referred to it usually as conscious autosuggestion, but conscious autosuggestion is just affirmations, the way they're usually looked at in this pop popular culture LOA community, right? Most people watching Sammy's advice, most people, finding out about robotic affirmations are not aware of the teachers I just mentioned. They're not really aware of people like Joseph Murphy or Catherine Ponder, who speak about affirmations wonderfully. They're certainly not aware of H. Emily Cady. They might be aware of Neville, or they probably are aware of Neville, but it's shocking how relatively few people have actually looked and read and studied and pondered and meditated upon what Neville talks about that are into the quote-unquote law of assumption. Most people have not. They say they're into the law of assumption, into Neville Goddard, but they've never actually read Neville Goddard, right? And almost nobody who is into Sammy's advice, or not almost nobody, but I would say less probably than 2% of people who are into Sammy's advice, and that's being kind, it's probably a lower percentage than that, have ever heard of Emile Coué, let alone actually pondered and considered what Emile Coué is talking about. And almost everything that Sammy discusses that's interesting stems from Emile Coué. Most people are not aware of this because they hear the sensationalism that Sammy spouts, and they get involved with this culture of commenting and hearing success stories that are often outlandish, many which are true perhaps, and many which might not be true. But they get caught up in the hysteria of the whole thing. And that hysteria, that type of sensationalistic, robotic affirming, that approach to affirmations is not going to work for most of you guys. It's just not going to. It might work once, it might work, occasionally, but it needs more of a explanation, more sustenance. Otherwise, it becomes just blind faith. Joseph Murphy talked wonderfully about blind faith. I'll put a link above to a podcast episode I did about it. And what a lot of these great LOA teachers are getting at is we must transcend just blind faith and actually understand why this stuff is working or not working in our lives. And as wonderful a teacher as Sammy can be at explaining these ideas, most of you don't have anything like that. You don't have the proper understanding of how this stuff actually works. So you fall for all this sensationalistic bullshit, and when it does not work the way you want, or you find out that, a lot of creators like Sammy delete negative comments and are basically, have formed a community that is gaslighting people who are not conforming to the very dogmatic ideas that Sammy and others, talk about when it comes to something like affirming. When you're not aware that that's going on and that's all you see, it fucks you up. You feel marginalized. And this great idea and technique and approach, affirming something, saying something, suggesting something over and over and over to yourself again and again, as an effective way to imbue your subconscious or your imagination with what you want, to provide you with positive expectancy. This very simple but powerful idea that Emile Coué articulated so brilliantly, in which some of the finest psychological minds of Europe and the United States explained very well in the early part of the 20th century. All of that interesting, helpful stuff that's basically been forgotten today is thrown out the window, and instead you get this sensationalistic marketing bullshit about how just robotically affirming is going to solve your life and your problems, everything you have, forevermore. Robotic affirming works better when we utilize common sense, when we utilize the golden rule, when we are aware of the history, at least the modern-ish history of the last 100 years or so, of how these repetitive affirmations and self-suggestions have worked effectively to change people's lives. It works better when we start to grasp that stuff more. And an influencer, which is what Sammy is, Sammy used to say, I want to be an influencer, is not going to provide you that type of education, unfortunately. She's not. What she calls coaching is not real coaching. Now, unlike a lot of people, I don't think she's ripping you off when she says, I'm going to charge you a couple $100 to send, and sends you some affirmations. I think that's fine. Got no problem with that. But it's not real coaching. Real coaches don't tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what you need to hear. And the robotic affirmations, mermaid gain, law of assumption scene in general is all about hearing what you want to hear, not what you need to hear. It's a problem. And it's right in front of your fucking face. And people are so gobsmacked by these ideas and taken by the groupthink that they don't realize it. If you realize it, you'll sober up some and you'll be able to get these ideas to work better in your life, I think. So this is my PSA video in regards to that. And like I said, I've made many videos about robotic affirmations and different ways to utilize affirmations. I'll put the Emile Coué playlist above. But yeah, that's all I have to say. And you deserve better than cheap explanations when it comes to this stuff. And I hope you get them.